12 years of marriage, and my husband stood up at his own mother's birthday dinner and announced he'd married the wrong sister. He said it like the decision was already final. What he didn't know was that his mother had spent that same week helping me hold the one piece of paper his family business couldn't survive without. He found that out 4 days later, and it was the last calm sentence he ever said to me. If you like stories about people who stay quiet right up until the exact moment it matters, hit subscribe now. You don't want to miss how this one ends. My name is Renata Hale. Everyone calls me Rennie. I'm 45 years old. And for 12 years I was married to a man named Adam Kessler. This is the story of the week I found out exactly what my silence and my marriage had actually been worth. I grew up in Winder, Georgia, the older of 2 daughters. My sister Paige is 8 years younger than me, and from the time she was born, our mother Diane treated the 2 of us like we belonged to different families entirely. I don't say that out of bitterness. I say it because it's simply what happened over and over for 35 years. When I was 16, I got a part-time job at a grocery store to save for a used Honda. I paid for that car myself in cash for $100 at a time. When Paige turned 16, my mother and stepfather bought her a brand new Jetta, still wrapped in a bow in the driveway. When I asked about it, my mother said, "You're more responsible, Rennie. Paige needs the help." I heard some version of that sentence for the next 3 decades. When I got married to Adam, my parents contributed $600 toward the wedding and told me they were stretched thin that year. 18 months later, when Paige got engaged to a man named Kyle, my mother and stepfather paid $11,000 for her wedding at a vineyard in Dahlonega, including her dress. I didn't say anything. I told myself weddings were different for a first daughter versus a second. I told myself it evened out somewhere I couldn't see. The third time, the one that stuck with me longest, was smaller and somehow worse. Paige went through a rough stretch after her divorce from Kyle 4 years ago. Job loss and eviction notice, 2 months behind on her car. My mother called me, not Paige, and asked if Adam and I could help out a little, until Paige got back on her feet. We did. We covered a security deposit, a couple of car payments, groceries more than once. When I mentioned, gently, that I'd appreciate some acknowledgement, my mother said, "Rennie, you have Adam. You have stability. Paige has nothing. Don't make this a competition." I wasn't trying to make it a competition. I was trying to be seen. My stepfather, Gerald, was the one who could have evened things out and never did. He wasn't cruel. He was just absent in the specific way that let my mother's favoritism run unchecked for years. If I brought something up, he'd say, "You know how your mother is," and go back to whatever he was doing. That sentence did a lot of work in our family. It excused nearly everything. There's a fourth memory I keep coming back to, smaller than the others but somehow the one that stayed sharpest. 2 Christmases ago, my mother went around the table asking each of us to say one thing we were proud of that year. When it got to me, I mentioned that Adam and I had finally paid off our mortgage 6 years early, a milestone I'd been quietly proud of for months. My mother nodded politely and moved on to Paige, who announced she'd gotten a promotion to assistant manager at a phone store. My mother teared up. She stood and hugged her. Nobody stood up for me. I told myself paying off a mortgage wasn't the kind of thing that needed applause. I've since stopped believing that. Here's the belief I built my life around. The one that let me keep showing up to Sunday dinners and birthday parties and pretend none of it stung. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself that once I had real success of my own, a stable marriage, a good career, a paid-off house, none of the old comparisons would matter anymore. I told myself that eventually, being the reliable one would be worth more than being the favorite one. What I didn't fully understand, not until years later, was that Adam had absorbed the same family math without ever saying so out loud. He married the daughter who paid for her own car. He just never planned on staying married to her once something better looked available. The night it happened was a Thursday in March, at Marchetti's, the Italian place on Broad Street where we'd celebrated every anniversary for a decade. It was supposed to be a family dinner, my mother's 65th birthday, 12 of us at a long table in the back room, including Paige, including Adam's mother Carol, who'd flown in from Charlotte for the occasion. I remember the exact moment things shifted because I was mid-sentence, telling Carol about a kitchen renovation quote, when Adam tapped his water glass with a fork like he was about to give a toast. Everyone went quiet. He stood up. "I know this isn't really the venue," he said, "but I've been trying to find the right time to say something honest, and I don't think there's ever going to be a perfect one." He looked at me, then at Paige, and I watched my sister's face go pale in a way that told me she already knew what was coming. "Rennie, I love you." "I do. But I think somewhere along the way, I married the wrong sister." For a second, nobody at that table moved. My mother's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Then Adam said the second half, quieter, like he thought it would soften it. "Paige and I have been seeing each other since November. She's 4 months pregnant. It's mine." "I want to tell you," I threw a glass of wine in his face. "I've watched that happen in movies 100 times, and some part of me thinks I owed the moment that kind of scene. Instead, I sat there and noticed the specific things people notice when their brain refuses to process what's in front of it. I noticed that Paige was wearing my mother's old pearl earrings. I noticed the waiter hovering near the kitchen door, unsure whether to bring the next course, holding a tray of tiramisu like it might explode. I noticed the candle on the table had burned down to almost nothing, and that somewhere in the back room a birthday song was still playing faintly from another table's phone. I noticed that my hands, resting on the white tablecloth, weren't shaking at all. Diane, my own mother, turned to me first, not to comfort me, but to manage the room. "Rennie, honey, let's not make a scene at my birthday." 12 years of marriage had just ended in front of 12 people, and the instruction was for me to keep it quiet. Paige started crying, the kind of crying that pulls all the attention in a room toward the person doing it rather than the person it happened to. "I never meant for it to happen this way," she said. It happened." Adam sat back down next to her, put his hand over hers on the table, and looked at me like he expected understanding. I found my voice eventually. "How long has everyone else known?" Silence answered that question better than words could have. Gerald wouldn't look up from his plate. My mother reached for her wine. Adam, misreading my calm for permission to keep going, added one more thing before I stood up to leave. "I filed for divorce this morning. My lawyer will be in touch. I didn't want you to hear it from a stranger." He said it like a kindness. Filing the paperwork before dinner, and telling me over birthday cake, was apparently his idea of doing this the right way. I picked up my purse, told Carol I was sorry to leave her son's announcement early, and walked out of Marchetti's into a cold parking lot, completely alone, 12 years erased in the time it takes to eat an appetizer. In the car, I sat for a long time without starting the engine, watching my breath fog the windshield, listening to my own pulse instead of turning on the radio. It was 8:52 on a Thursday night. I remember the time because I looked at the dashboard clock 3 separate times, as if checking it enough would eventually make it say something different. Here's the part Adam didn't know. And honestly, the part almost nobody in that restaurant knew. 6 years earlier, Kessler Construction, the company Adam's late father built and that Adam had taken over, nearly collapsed. A bad commercial contract in Athens, Georgia left the company holding almost $300,000 in unpaid materials and payroll obligations. Adam came to me in a panic that spring, certain the business, and by extension our marriage, was about to fall apart. I had money of my own by then. An inheritance from my grandmother, invested carefully for nearly a decade, plus savings from my job managing accounts for a regional healthcare group. I didn't want to simply hand Adam a personal check and watch him feel indebted to me for the rest of our marriage, so my attorney and I did something quieter. We formed a small holding company under my maiden name, Halebridge Holdings LLC, and through it, we purchased the note on Kessler Construction's outstanding debt from the bank that was about to call it in. We also secured a UCC lien against the company's major equipment, the excavators, the framing rigs, the box trucks, as collateral. To Adam, to his mother, to everyone, it looked like a restructuring deal with an outside investor. He never asked who the investor was. He was too relieved to be curious. I let him believe it was some anonymous benefactor his late father's old business partner had arranged. For 6 years, I quietly held the paper that kept his company alive, and I never once mentioned it, because I genuinely didn't think I'd ever need to. Carol knew. She was the one person I'd told, back when it happened, because the deal required her signature as a minority shareholder on her late husband's estate. She kept that secret for 6 years without a single slip, not even during holidays, not even during arguments. I didn't know, sitting in that parking lot outside Marchetti's, that Carol had been quietly furious about that dinner from the first sentence Adam said, and that she was about to do something about it before I even asked her to. What I did know, driving home that night, was that I finally had a decision to make about a piece of leverage I'd never once planned on using. Before I tell you exactly what I did next, make sure you're subscribed, because this is the part neither Adam nor my sister saw coming. And it starts with a phone call. I didn't cry until I got home, and even then, not for long. What I did instead, the next morning, was call an attorney named Vivian Okafor, who had handled the original Halebridge Holdings paperwork years earlier. I sat in her office on Prince Avenue with a cup of coffee I didn't drink and told her everything. The dinner, the pregnancy, the filing Adam had already started. "You still hold the note," Vivian said, flipping through the file. "And the UCC lien is current. You've kept the LLC in good standing this entire time. Annual filings, registered agent fees, all of it, every March like clockwork." "I have," I said. I hadn't told her why I'd kept it so meticulously current for 6 years. Honestly, I'm not sure I fully understood it myself until that morning. Some part of me, I think, had always known this piece of paper might matter one day, even if I never let myself think too hard about why. She looked at me for a long moment. "Do you want to renegotiate the terms, or do you want to call it?" I thought about the 6 years I'd spent watching Adam take credit, quietly, for saving a business that I had actually saved. I thought about Paige wearing our mother's earrings while she cried about a pregnancy she'd known about for months before I did. I thought about the specific instruction to not make a scene at my own unraveling. "I want the loan called," I said. "Full balance, due in accordance with the original terms. No renegociación." The original note had a standard commercial acceleration clause. If the borrower defaulted on payment terms or if there was a material change in the borrower's marital or financial circumstances directly tied to the personal guarantor, Halebridge Holdings had the right to demand payment in full within 30 days. Adam had personally guaranteed that loan. His filing for divorce, and the resulting division of marital assets that would follow, counted as exactly the kind of material change the clause described. Vivian had drafted it that way on purpose years earlier, just in case. We also began the paperwork to enforce the UCC lien on the equipment, which meant that if the balance wasn't paid, Halebridge Holdings had the legal right to repossess the excavators, the trucks, and the framing rigs Kessler Construction needed to finish 3 active job sites. I want to be clear about something. This wasn't rage. It didn't feel like rage sitting in Vivian's office that Friday morning. It felt like arithmetic. For 6 years, I had quietly protected a business that employed 31 people and carried Adam's father's name, because I loved my husband and believed we were building something together. He had just told a room full of our family that he'd married the wrong sister and filed divorce paperwork before dessert. I no longer had a reason to keep protecting anything of his quietly. Vivian sent the formal notice that Monday, 30 days to satisfy the note in full, or Halebridge Holdings would proceed with lien enforcement on all listed collateral. It went to Kessler Construction's registered agent, and to Adam personally by certified mail, return receipt requested, along with a courtesy copy to the company's bank so there could be no confusion later about timing or intent. I didn't call him. I didn't warn him. I let the paperwork do exactly what paperwork is supposed to do. That weekend, I drove out to the storage unit where I kept old boxes from the early years of our marriage and found the folder from 2020, the original loan documents with my signature on them under my maiden name. I sat on the concrete floor of that unit for almost an hour, reading through pages I hadn't looked at in years, remembering how frightened Adam had sounded the night he first told me the company might not survive the month. I hadn't done any of it to be thanked. I'd done it because I loved him, and because 31 families depended on a business that had nothing to do with the woman he'd chosen to humiliate at his mother's birthday dinner. Somewhere between the folder and the parking lot, I stopped feeling guilty about what came next. The call came Wednesday morning, 11 days before the 30-day deadline. Adam's name lit up my phone 6 times before I answered the 7th. "What is this?" he said, no greeting, his voice already climbing. I got a letter from some holding company saying they're calling a $300,000 note and taking our equipment. What the hell is Halebridge Holdings? It's my company, I said. It's been my company since 2020. There was a long silence on the line. That's not possible. That deal came through Dad's old contact, Whitfield. Some private investor group. There was no investor group, Adam. There was me and Vivian and your mother's signature because it was her shares that made it legal. Another silence longer. You're telling me you've owned my company's debt this whole time and never said anything? I'm telling you I saved your company, and you never asked who did it, because you were too relieved to be curious. I let you have that relief for 6 years. I'm done letting you have it for free. He asked to meet in person, which is how I ended up at Kessler Construction's office on a Thursday afternoon, sitting across a conference table from Adam, his mother Carol, and because he insisted she needed to understand what was happening to the family. Paige, 7 months pregnant, sitting stiffly in the corner. Adam opened with the line I expected. Rennie, whatever's going on between us personally, this is a family business. This affects people who had nothing to do with our marriage. 31 families. My father built this. Your father's business almost died in 2019, I said. I'm the reason it didn't. You can be angry at how you found that out. You don't get to be surprised that the person who saved it once still has the ability to make decisions about it. We're still family, he said. Whatever happens with the divorce, we're going to be connected through. He gestured vaguely at Paige's stomach, unable to finish the sentence cleanly. We're not, I said. We were family when I was covering payroll shortfalls you never knew about. We stopped being family the night you announced you'd married the wrong sister over birthday cake, and told me you'd already filed. Adam's jaw tightened. So this is punishment. You're using my father's company to get back at me. No, I said. This is a contract. You signed a personal guarantee in 2020, because you needed help and I gave it to you without asking for credit. I'm not rewriting history to punish you. I'm simply done pretending the history didn't happen. He looked at Vivian's letter on the table, like it might change if he stared long enough. 30 days isn't enough time to restructure anything this size. It was enough time for you to file divorce paperwork before telling your wife your marriage was over, I said. I think you'll manage. Paige spoke up from the corner, her voice thin. Rennie, please. Think about the babies. This isn't their fault. You're right, I said, and I meant it. It isn't. But this isn't about the babies, Paige. This is about a business loan and a personal guarantee. I paused, because I genuinely didn't know what word to use for Adam anymore. Your partner signed 6 years ago, before he decided honesty was optional. Adam slammed his hand flat on the table. You want to bankrupt me. You want to punish me by taking food out of the mouths of people who work for me. I want you to satisfy a legally binding note, I said. The same way I've honored every legal and financial obligation in this marriage for 12 years, including one you never even knew existed. If the company can't satisfy it, that's not a punishment I invented. That's a consequence you created the moment you filed for divorce before telling me you'd already decided our marriage was over. It was Carol who spoke next, and her voice cut through the room in a way that silenced Adam completely. I signed that paperwork 6 years ago because Rennie asked me to help save your father's name, Adam, and she did it without ever asking you to owe her anything. I have kept that secret for 6 years out of respect for her, not for you. You stood up at my birthday dinner and humiliated her in front of 12 people, including me. You do not get to sit in this room now and act like the wronged party. Adam looked at his mother like she'd struck him. You knew this whole time? I did, Carol said. And frankly, watching you find out this way is the first time in 6 years I've felt like the universe was being fair to somebody in this family. Paige started crying again, quieter this time, and for once nobody in the room rushed to comfort her. I stood up, gathered my folder, and looked at Adam one last time. You have 11 days, I said. I suggest you talk to your bank. What followed wasn't dramatic in the way you might expect. There was no single cinematic collapse. It happened the way most real consequences happen, slowly, then all at once, spread across paperwork and phone calls instead of a single explosive scene. Kessler Construction couldn't produce $300,000 in 11 days. Adam tried, first with a personal line of credit, which fell through when the bank saw the pending divorce filing, and the certified notice from Hale Bridge Holdings on his credit report. Then he tried to negotiate directly with Vivian for an extension. She offered 60 days at a modestly reduced balance, on the condition that the UCC lien remain fully in place and enforceable immediately upon any missed payment. He accepted because he had no other realistic option. 2 of the company's 3 active job sites stalled for nearly 3 weeks while Adam scrambled to refinance through a commercial lender in Athens, at a significantly higher interest rate than the original note. For subcontractors walked off pending jobs when payment timelines slipped. By late summer, Kessler Construction was still standing technically but smaller, down to 19 employees from 31, and carrying debt at nearly double the interest rate I had quietly protected them from for 6 years. Paige gave birth in July to twin boys, 7 weeks premature, both healthy after a short stay in the NICU. I heard this from Carol, not from Paige or Adam directly. My mother sent a group text with photos I didn't open for 3 days. Adam and Paige did not get married that year or the year after. From what I understand, the early excitement of their relationship didn't survive the financial strain, the family fallout, or frankly, each other's company once the novelty wore off. They co-parent now, according to Carol, with a kind of tense practicality that suggests whatever they had wasn't built to last past the affair itself. My mother, for her part, called me twice that summer to suggest I consider forgiving Adam for the family's sake, and once to ask, without apparent irony, whether I could maybe ease up on the loan situation for Paige's sake. I told her the loan situation had nothing to do with Paige, and everything to do with a contract Adam signed with his own name 6 years before he decided to break his vows with mine. By September, Kessler Construction had refinanced enough to stabilize, though at a real cost. Adam sold a boat he'd owned since before we married, along with a truck he'd kept as a backup for job sites, just to cover the gap between the old loan terms and the new ones. Word got around Winder the way it always does in a town that size, slowly at first, then all at once, until half the people at my old gym seemed to know some version of the story, usually with a few details wrong and 1 or 2 added for drama. I finalized my divorce from Adam that October. It was, by any measure, unglamorous: spreadsheets, appraisals, a mediator's office on Baxter Street, and an attorney's invoice that made me briefly reconsider my career choices. There was no dramatic courtroom scene. There didn't need to be. Vivian and I had already done the important work months earlier, quietly, in an office with bad coffee. I kept Hale Bridge Holdings. I still hold a note on Kessler Construction, smaller now, being paid down steadily under the renegotiated terms. I don't take pleasure in that anymore. What I feel now mostly is a kind of settled clarity, the sense that I spent 12 years being the responsible daughter, the reliable wife, the quiet investor, and none of that ever needed Adam's permission or my mother's approval to be worth something. I bought a small house near downtown Winder that spring, 3 bedrooms, a garden I'm slowly learning to keep alive, a kitchen with a window over the sink where I can watch the street while I make coffee. Carol visits every few weeks. We've grown closer since the divorce than Adam and I ever were toward the end of our marriage. She tells people, only half joking, that she lost a daughter-in-law and gained a friend who actually returns her calls. Paige and I speak occasionally now, carefully, the way you speak to someone you're still deciding whether to fully trust again. I sent a gift for the twins. I haven't been to see them yet. Some bridges take longer to rebuild than others, and I've stopped pretending that time alone repairs everything. My mother and I are still working things out too, slower than I'd like, but slower feels honest in a way that pretending never did. If there's a lesson in all of this, it's this: being underestimated isn't a weakness you have to apologize for. Sometimes it's simply the quiet space where you get to build something real, long before anyone else realizes it's yours. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And tell me in the comments what you would have done in my place. Would you have called that note the way I did, or would you have let it go quietly? Sometimes the strongest response isn't the loudest one. It's the one you were already prepared for long before you needed it.